American analysts analyzed Putin's reluctance to meet with Zelenskyy. What is behind this? Putin is afraid of direct talks with Zelenskyy. My name is Albina Pidhirnyak, current analytics for your attention. The day before, Putin took part in some kind of regular conference in Russia, where he said that it is thanks to President Trump that he is improving relations with the United States of America. The Russian dictator talks about improving relations with the United States at a time when Russia continues to bomb Ukrainian cities.
About our relations with the United States, they have been at an extremely low level since World War II. I have already spoken about this many times, but with the advent of President Trump, I think that this light has nevertheless loomed at the end of the tunnel, and we have just had a very good, substantive and frank meeting in Alaska. Contacts continue at the level of our ministries, departments and companies, and I very much hope that the first steps that have been taken are only the beginning of a full-scale restoration of our relations. It does not depend on us. It depends on our Western partners, in the broad sense of the word, because the United States is also bound by certain obligations within the framework of various associations, including the North Atlantic Bloc. So it is the leadership of the United States that depends on the next step. But I am sure that the leadership qualities of the current president, President Trump, are a good guarantee that relations will be restored. And I hope that the pace of our joint work on this platform will continue.
The first Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Sergiy Kyslytsya, gave an interview to NBC News. He said that the Russians have been promoting the narrative that Ukraine doesn't want peace and everyone in Russia is a peacemaker for a very long time.
I heard this many times back when I was serving as Ukraine's permanent representative to the United Nations in New York. This is not a new narrative. They have been trying to promote it for many years, but in my opinion, we should reject it and not be distracted by what Lavrov says. I believe that the leadership of President Trump and his team, as well as the leadership of Ukraine, are moving in the right direction to advance negotiations, and we must work very hard. I know that our foreign minister and the head of the office of the President of Ukraine, Andriy Yermak, are making significant efforts in cooperation with their American counterparts, and I am truly convinced that the United States and the Trump administration have sufficient leverage over Moscow to move the process forward.
Sergiy Kyslytsya also noted that Ukraine is working diligently to ensure the security guarantees our country needs. According to Mr. Kyslytsya, these developments will be ready in the coming days.
President Trump wants to bring this war to an end as soon as possible. This was part of our lengthy conversation in the Oval Office. My president explained this to President Trump, and later in the day, the European leaders who joined us also conveyed this position to the American side. If we are talking about security guarantees, this is such an important and complex issue that we truly need at least a week to prepare a solid draft package of security guarantees for Ukraine. Since Monday evening, the National Security Council and the Chief of the General Staff have been working practically every day on preparing this document. So, ideally, we may have the first draft at the beginning of next week, after which the political leadership must decide how to proceed with these drafts on the political level. I believe that Russia must fulfill its part of the agreements, namely to cooperate with the United States and Ukraine's European partners, who will coordinate the security guarantees among themselves. In my view, these guarantees should not be a subject of negotiations with the Russian Federation. They are designed to protect against the aggressor and to prevent renewed aggression, not to serve as an instrument for any malign activities by the aggressor in the future.
Sergiy Kyslytsya noted that Russia continues its manipulations. Russia doesn't want peace. The United States of America is gradually beginning to understand this. That is why pressure on Russia from the United States is the most reliable way to force the occupiers to enter into any negotiations.
Russia continues to manipulate the United States and President Trump personally. In my opinion, this is starting to greatly irritate the Americans. We, however, are used to it, since we have been dealing with Moscow, its aggression, tactics, and strategies since 2014. In fact, we are already in the 12th year of the war, but I think that gradually the US administration is coming to a better understanding that it has been manipulated by Moscow. I see no signs that Putin is ready for substantive discussions or for a meeting, neither a bilateral nor a trilateral one, which we discussed in Washington on Monday. The set and snap mechanism should be applied, and additional pressure should be triggered almost immediately once the deadline President Trump has in mind expires. At that point, Russia must truly feel the consequences of refusing to follow the path of peace that President Trump has offered to the Russian Federation.
They also talked about the territorial issues and a possible meeting between Putin and Zelenskyy. It was noted that issues regarding territories can only be discussed at such a bilateral meeting.
I believe that President Zelenskyy's position is absolutely clear. He is guided both by the current legal framework in Ukraine and by public sentiment, and society is categorically opposed to trading our land for peace. This position was clearly conveyed in Washington. At the same time, when we spoke about territorial issues, President Zelenskyy made it very clear that he is ready to sit down with President Putin and discuss them, and the starting point for such discussions on territorial matters is the current line of contact.
The Kremlin is signaling that Russian dictator Vladimir Putin doesn't want to hold a bilateral meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. This is how the Institute of the Study of War assessed the latest statements of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation, Sergei Lavrov.
The Kremlin is likely concerned that a bilateral Putin-Zelensky meeting could undermine Putin's domestic justification for Russia's war in Ukraine. Russian opposition outlet Verstka reported on August 22nd, citing interlocutors in the Kremlin, that the Kremlin sees a Putin-Zelensky meeting in the near future as unlikely. A political strategist working in the Kremlin told Verstka that Putin and his advisors fear reputational consequences as a result of meeting with Zelensky. A source who works with the Kremlin's domestic political project stated that Kremlin presidential aide Yuri Ushakov's August 18th statement about raising the level of the negotiating delegations is more like a polite refusal to the proposed Putin-Zelensky meeting. ISW previously assessed that the Kremlin failed to commit to a Putin-Zelensky meeting following the August 18th Trump-Putin call, and Kremlin officials led by Lavrov continue to explicitly reject such a meeting in the immediate future. ISW continues to assess that the Kremlin is struggling to balance between appeasing a domestic audience that has been conditioned to accept nothing less than a full Russian victory in Ukraine and staving off further US sanctions that could impact Russia's ability to sustain its war effort.
ABC News political correspondent Rachel Scott asked Putin a series of uncomfortable questions. In particular, during his visit to Alaska, she, among other things, asked Putin when he would stop killing civilians in Ukraine. Putin pretended not to hear the question and, of course, he didn't answer it. But Rachel received many words of gratitude and support from Ukrainians and people all over the world. And in response, the journalist released this video.
So many of you saw this question I asked Russian President Vladimir Putin.
My question is, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of? You didn't answer my question, sir. If all of your political opponents are dead, in prison, poisoned, doesn't that send a message that you do not want a fair political fight?
Well, 4 years later, I found myself in the same room as him once again, this time as he met President Trump in Alaska. He didn't hold a press conference this time where he took any questions, and so here's what I shouted.
Mr. Putin, will you agree to a ceasefire? Mr. Putin, will you commit to not killing any more civilians? Mr. Putin, will you stop killing civilians?
And the reason why I shouted that question is because the violence continues. She was just 18 months old. She was killed by Russia. 5 attack drones hitting her home, and she was sleeping at the time. As I made my way back home to Washington, D.C., I heard from so many of you, so many people in Ukraine, sharing your personal stories. Where does all of this stand now? That summit ended with no ceasefire and no consequences for Russia. President Trump says that Vladimir Putin has agreed to sit down with Ukrainian President Zelenskyy one-on-one, but now Russia not really showing signs of that happening anytime soon. The fighting continues.
Dear viewers, thank you for watching this video. Give it a like and leave your comment. I'll be grateful for your activity and communication. Take care. See you soon.